Well, hello. This is the Be Engaged podcast, where we bring together brilliant minds, elevate discussions across many industries to promote unity in this world. So welcome to Be Engaged. I'm your host, Michelle Harper. So today we are discussing what is happening in the mountain biking industry and recent technology advancements. So let's check in with Jason Schiers with GT Bicycle, Clint Spiegel from Industry 9, and Andy Hilliard with Crank Brothers. Welcome, fellas. Welcome.
Thank you. Fun.
Yeah. Okay. So we start these things off with a fun fact, get the conversation going. And at the end, I do like a favorite quote of the podcast. So please remind me, because these last two podcasts, I forgot that favorite quote. So we'll see how it goes. Okay. So fun fact about technology trends in the biking industry. So I looked this up so you guys can correct me whatever is needed. So there's a rise in smart bikes that integrate Internet of Things technology. So some high-end bikes now come equipped with GPS tracking, real-time performance data, and even theft prevention systems. So for example, certain e-bikes can lock themselves electronically and send alerts to the phone if they're moved without authorization. What about either one of those? Are those accurate fun facts? Are they not? Tell me all about it.
I would just hazard to say that all of those have some basis in reality and truth.
Oh.
But as far as the tracking and ability to control an e-bike from a phone and whatnot and collect the data off of it, that stuff's all legal.
I actually have something to add to that. I was talking to a guy that was starting a company in the Silicon Valley area who was working on GPS positioning to make it a next level more accurate. So I believe he was talking about getting within 50 centimeters. And so that there was a technology that he was discussing, like you had an e-bike and you have different classes of e-bikes with different speed limits. So if you knew exactly where you were, you could actually differentiate whether you were on a greenway or on a road. And
wow.
So, then your speed could be higher or lower based on that. And, I think that same technology could be used even for, trail, the legal users for trails. There's conflict with mountain bikers and hikers, zipping downhill, turning around a corner, scaring a hiker, or even worse, a horse rider. And, so you might even be seeing some of these GPS positionings being able to warn you or slow you down, in those situations. Those are extensions of that technology that nobody has yet, but are probably coming down the line.
And that would be great, because I know here in Laguna, Andy, we have top of the world trails, and there's people walking and bikers, and it gets a little scary when they're both on the same trail. If they could give you a heads up, that would be great.
It would be nice. It would be nice. Definitely there's conflicts, I think, in most every area with multi-users, whether it's bike, equestrian, hikers. Yeah, I mean, not everybody knows the proper etiquette for whatever sport they're doing. So maybe some of these future developments and safety warnings through tech could be interesting.
Okay.
Personally, I'm also a little bit torn because I appreciate all that type of stuff. But at the same time, with mountain biking, a lot of times you're trying to get away from it all and, get into nature and disconnect. So it's an interesting balance trying to add technology to your activity, but still enjoy the outdoors.
Yeah. And maybe it was a year or so ago, or maybe more, but there was a camp, whether you were an e-bike, mountain bike camp or not, like absolutely not. And it seems like that's worked itself out. Where are you guys at? Where are you guys at on the camps?
Well, being I'm in my 50s, I'm 100% on the e-bike camp.
And I will say exactly in the same breath, I'm in my 50s and I'm 100% off the e-bike kick.
Oh, there's still
there's your answer.
And that's because of fitness, like in your 50s, it's more critical than ever. And I've noticed, I've used an e-bike, I've noticed that it eases my effort level down a little bit too much. So I try to avoid it as much as I think it's fun, and it's coming harder and harder and bigger. And I'll even go so far as to say we will be living in a world that will have all kinds of assistance, whether it's intelligence assistance or power assistance. So I mean, that's definitely the future, but kind of like Andy, I like to disconnect, but also I just want every every ounce of intensity I can get. So,
Good.
So that leads me to stay away from them personally. So,
Good.
I've got a leg in both camps. I love them both for different reasons. And man, I will say, like, if you haven't been on an e-bike and you're hating on it, like, throw a leg over, because you won't be able to wipe the smile off your face. They certainly are fun, but
they are fun, that's for sure.
They have their pros and cons. They have their
Yeah.
pros and cons.
I would sum it up like this: you can still build a house with a hammer, by all means.
Yeah.
I just prefer to use the nail gun.
Like, I'm using the automated nail gun that gives me a little assistance. Well,
yeah. Well, I run a factory that has a lot of CNC machines, and if I had said back in the days that was coming online that I would prefer to hand crank the machines, I would be relegated to the trash heap of history for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good. That was a good fun fact. All right. Well, that kicks us off. So, Andy, we have known each other for how long?
It's probably 7-8 years since the kids were in the Montessori school locally.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think something like that. Yeah.
So we're here local. We've been hanging out for quite some time.
Yeah.
And his wife and I are walkers, and she's a hardcore biker, and I'm not.
Oh, man,
so we
she's a
decided to
treasure.
walk together.
That's a whole other story on her side, but yeah, she's a badass.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay, so let's start with your guys' background. So, Jason, tell us about how you started. What's the background and what's going
currently
on?
the managing director of GT
Managing
Bicycles.
director, okay.
It's part of a very large group based out of the Netherlands. But my background is I've been a serial entrepreneur and found my way into the bike industry in the late 90s through carbon fiber products, and then went on to start a couple companies since then, and spent a period of time after I left the last company I'd started working with Andy at Crank Brothers, and then left Crank Brothers to take the position at GT.
Okay. And Clint, over to you. What's your background with Industry 9? You were one of the founders, is that right?
Yeah, I founded Industry 9. My rough background, or the most important elements, are my father actually started a machine shop about the same year I was born, contract manufacturing. I grew up in the machine shop. I decided to make it my career at about 16, and I was a ridiculous workaholic. I've since solved that problem, but
through biking, manual way.
Largely.
Okay, good.
But one of the big goals for my father and I when I came on board full time was to start other companies that had our own product line. Contract manufacturing, you're always making parts for other people. So that was my main goal. And I started Industry 9. It's called Industry 9 because it's the 9th company we either started or were part of. And then, in that period of time, I started a software company that was pretty much a complete failure, a robotics company that was semi-successful. We even did high-end tactical knives. So I've been in a lot of different veins, but Industry 9 started it about 2005, and at about the same time I was becoming passionate about cycling, and that was by far our biggest and most successful company that we started. So
Good.
That's the rough background.
Great. And Andy, you're with Crank Brothers. I know you guys just moved offices. Tell us a little bit about that background.
So I've been with Crank Brothers for 18 years now. And yeah, prior to that, I kind of got introduced into cycling and fell in love with cycling while living up in Lake Tahoe in my 20s. And as I kind of hit the ceiling in the mountain town working at a ski resort, we decided to move down to Southern California, and through some friends was able to grab a job at Crank Brothers. And honestly, I've really enjoyed it and been here ever since. And there's been ups and downs. There's been a lot that's happened, but it's been amazing to kind of be part of the growth and work with some really cool people like Jason. Yeah. And you mentioned San Clemente. Yes. Unfortunately, we just recently moved out of Laguna down to San Clemente, but
that's a lifestyle hurt, right?
It is. No, the office is nice and it's near some trails, but it's a big change. Crank Brothers was founded in Laguna in 97. So, there's almost a 30-year history in Laguna. And so, yeah, things have visually changed a little bit, but the core, I think, is the same. The heartbeat's the same.
Good. It evolves. Everything's evolving. And Jason,
Going.
where's GT Bicycles located at?
We're also located close to Laguna. We're in Aliso Viejo.
Perfect. Oh, and then, okay, you guys work together. And Clint, you are in North Carolina, is that right?
Yep, Asheville, North Carolina.
So let's take a little bit of a moment. How is North Carolina doing? There were some serious weather issues, and there was hurricanes, there was tornadoes, or just hurricanes.
I think there was the big event was a hurricane, mostly flooding. There was some wind issues, a lot of blown down trees, and there might have been micro tornadoes that were part of that. But generally, it was a hurricane. Yeah, I mean, Asheville's in bad shape. Personally, our factories and most of our employees, were had a fairly low impact. I was proud of how much help my guys provided everybody in the community and as a company. The biggest hit areas, I would say, are just outside of Asheville.
Okay.
When it gets a little more mountainous and the flooding and the gradient of the streams gets high, there was a lot of landslides and houses lost and roads taken out, bridges taken out. And those areas that, they have a long way to go still.
Wow.
A lot of businesses were allowing our major river flooded to beyond historic flood levels, and a lot of industrial buildings got taken out as well. So
really, the recovery is going to be some time. It sounds
there's going
like
to be a lot of loss of businesses and stuff like that. But our direct life is okay right now.
Well, we're thinking of you, so I'm glad everything's going okay, though.
Clint shared after the fact when I was talking to him, which I think's a really important message to get out there. But when I had reached out to him after the event had happened, he had shared the stories of the community coming together and how much support it had and how much people had shown up and helped. I thought it was pretty heartwarming.
Good.
It restores your faith in humanity. Let's put it that way. It was good to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's nice. Okay, so talk to me a little bit about the trends in the bike industry. We talked about the fun fact of technology. I have a little bit of a technology background, so I'm interested in that. But overall, what are the trends, the major trends, over the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years in the biking industry? Can you guys talk a little bit about that?
Who wants to take it?
Jason, I think you'd be a good one to start with.
I've
seen a lot.
Electrification, honestly,
Yes.
like the last 5 years has been electrification, and it's in all the different ways that it's able to show up, whether it be onboard lights or onboard computers or onboard whatever. I think what it really kind of comes down to, and Clint kind of alluded to the assistance thing. I think user experience is key right now, and I think we're grooming people as a whole. With all the electronics we use and all the different avenues that we are assisted, that user experience is what it's about. And so I know for our group, most of the stuff we're working on now is how do we increase the interface and the user experience opportunities, even on just regular pedal bikes. So I think we're going to see a lot of changes. The other thing I'd throw at it is I think the mobility thing is going to change a lot in the next, 10 years. How we define mobility is going to change. So it's exciting. There's a lot of new opportunities, a lot of things. Whereas historically, we really focused on patents and technologies around how the bike works. Most of those patents are up now. So suspension patents and other key patents are all expired. So pretty much anybody can build a bike, which really begs the question, with all the technology and electronics coming onto the bike, are we going to see players from Samsung or players from Apple or people that can own the electronic user interface and then just simply build a bike around it?
The patents that are now available.
On that point, Jason, it seems like some companies, like everybody's talking about that DJI company with their new motor, and that this company, I guess, has done drones for years, and they're starting to get into the cycling industry. So hey, maybe that's just the first of many to come.
Yeah, it used to be the bike technology was the thing that set you apart, and now the bike technologies are pretty uniform, at least the quality of bike. You can buy pretty much any reputable bike now, and it's a really good bike. So yeah, I think just the thinking about what you create as a product is changing.
Our company is a component company, so we're making the components for bikes and the high-end bikes. I have gotten to witness like one of the biggest just mechanical improvements to the mountain bike was when shock absorbers and front forks shocks started being put on the bike. We actually made a lot of parts for Rock Shocks when it was started in the early 90s. And, so there were a lot of big improvements to the bike for a few years. I would say lately, most of that has become tied into minutia. So just like Jason and Andy were saying, the biggies are the electrification, the battery improvement, the motor improvement. Artificial intelligence will certainly start playing in for better controls and positioning, GPS positioning, and stuff like that. But there's also this trend of just making what I would call minutia more improvements to the components. So like one of the things that put us on the map was a faster engaging hub. And we work on other components that are trying to improve the speed and the connection of the human to the bike. So, in my robotics work, one of the things that you start learning, I'm going to use hand gestures, is just how tightly integrated your muscles and brain and nerves and feel and touch and everything are. And when you put that through a mechanical device, you lose some connection to what you're wanting to do, So if you could somehow make the bike to be almost a nervous system extension of your body, you would have a better experience.
That is so interesting.
So we work on
an extension of your body. So all of the sensors, but then you have to kind of bring in AI to figure that out. Do you think that, I hadn't heard about AI in bikes yet. Do you think that the AI would, in the future, will be kind of like self-driving cars where it'll ensure that you don't wreck, or it'll ensure that it self-corrects? What do you think that AI will be even used for?
I think there's a couple ways you look at that. So first of all, let me take away the AI element of it, because that's future stuff. It's not happening now.
Yeah.
The mechanical interface refinements are happening. However, we're positioning ourselves to be able to take advantage of these new technologies as they move forward.
Yeah.
And I think you've got two things. You're going to have people who just want to ride a bike safely. Okay. And that's not going to be the world we're going to be involved in. We're going to be involved in the athletic side of it. So how can we give a person's ability to ride their bike at a higher level? So this is pie in the sky stuff, but I do think that we'll be able to do it one of these days. But, like when you're, lifting something, you're feeling the strength of your muscles and stuff like that. So if you could feel the bicycle frame, you're getting somewhere. So, if you have strain sensors, who knows, maybe you have a Neuralink that can feed, the stresses that the bike is feeling, then your body's going to be able to react to it. But again, that's pie in the sky stuff. That's
I hadn't even
not
thought
happening.
of that. That's interesting. It's many, many years from now, but still, that's very interesting.
And it might be faster than we think.
Yeah,
Things
the
are
many
accelerating.
years thing tends to move quicker and quicker these days.
Okay.
Those things may help address other problems that, in the bike industry we're trying to sort out with, vibration damping and things through the body, through the hands. Who knows what some of that tech will bring in the future. It's interesting though.
Yeah. So Andy, I know you were just in Whistler. You go to a lot of events. I'm sure Jason, Clint, you folks do as well. But when you're at those events with all the biking industry and the professionals and the athletes that are really wanting to push the edge, and a lot of them are professional, actually. We know even in town, there's some professional biking folks that we know. What do they say? What is their feedback? What are they talking about? The users, what are they mostly interested in or guiding what they want as they communicate with you?
From my perspective, go ahead. I'm sorry, Andy.
No, please. No, go ahead, Clint. Please, you're on it.
I mean, I'll quickly. I think it's traditional stuff mostly. Make the bike lighter, faster, stronger. So they can use their body to manipulate the bike and do what they need to do for the most part. Obviously, other people, and this is, I would call it more in the recreational side of it. They're always looking for a lighter e-bike or a more powerful e-bike or an e-bike with longer ranges. But I would say those are the two major things that we currently hear regularly. But, that doesn't include the vision of what it could be.
Yeah. Anything that you're hearing that's different?
You seem to notice with e-bikes, I think, make mountain biking specifically more approachable for more people. So that tech has lent itself well to more people getting involved in the sport and maybe not being as daunting of a task to try this sport out. I mean, there's many places that are probably easier to learn to ride a mountain bike than Laguna. This is a very difficult one. So, I mean, for instance, my son, like, he has no interest in pedaling a normal bike up a hill, but he will ride an e-bike up the hill. So, am I going to force the acoustic and just not ride with him, or kind of jump on the e-bike and enjoy riding with the family? So I mean, I just think that has opened the doors for more people to get excited about cycling, which is great.
Yeah. Jason, are you hearing anything in your side?
Yeah, I mean, all of what those guys are saying is true. I think probably the most excited group of people should be the motorcycle industry, because you've got a whole youth group growing up on like Super 73s and e-bikes and throttle bikes, and those guys are all going to turn 16 at some point, and then they're going to, like, once you get caught up in a two-wheel lifestyle, it doesn't leave you at 16. You've grown to love. I think that's going to be a real interesting thing as time to come. But as far as bike festivals and whatnot go, I tend to be the snarkiest of the group here, but if an athlete's having a really good time or having a really good day, it's usually because they're really talented. And if they're having a bad day, they blame it on the equipment. So like, I don't put a lot of weight on what my athletes say unless they're wanting to be constructive or talk about development. I do find those events really spectacular for being able to walk around and look at people's bikes and look at how they're tweaking their bikes and looking at the parts they're putting on their bikes and how they're changing it up. So it's a really good opportunity when you get in those events where there's a lot of public, kind of look at trends and because the public always will find these unique opportunities to improve the equipment or improve the bike and the experience just based off of usage. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times that's regional too. So I find the events very educational.
Good. I kind of I'm like, every time Andy and Megan tell us where they're at, I'm like, I want to go.
Working in the bike industries. Yeah, working in the bike industry is not a bad thing. You end up in a lot of fun places.
It's pretty cool.
That is true. It is ideal.
And there's quite a few little bike festivals that, from a brand perspective, it's really nice because you make yourself approachable to the customer, and you can really learn a lot from them when they're able to comfortably come up to you and chat and explain their problem or give a suggestion or whatever the case may be. But yeah, it's a nice format to allow them to get close.
Good. All right, let's change gears a little bit and talk about risks to the biking industry. So I was kind of perusing through some articles, and I read something about supply chain, and the parts of the biking industry is primarily in one area in Asia. And is there any risks to the biking industry, especially with a lot of the political stuff going on and, maybe some skirmishes happening right now in the Middle East? They are happening. And anything on the risks or even supply chain area?
Yeah, I mean, at some point I'm expecting they'll do some kind of a review how an industry has completely nuked itself. Like, I think...
Wait, what? The biking industry?
Yeah. So,
okay. Oh, this is going to be interesting.
As much as everybody wants to blame something else, people got greedy during COVID, and they were all battling for manufacturing space and capacity, and if you had a bike, you could sell it. Yeah. Didn't matter what it was. So people were hitting record numbers during COVID, and everybody was fighting for capacity. And in doing so, you had to put bigger and bigger purchase orders together. And so it was a bit of a bidding game to get stuff made, and whoever would throw the biggest purchase order could get it. And so we all bought way too many bikes. Like everybody was guilty of it, and some more than others. And in the end, there wasn't an infinite number of people on the planet that were still going to buy bikes. I think must be, there was no growth in population, but for some reason we as an industry thought there would be an infinite growth in bike sales. And so when that kind of capped and the sales slowed, and it hasn't been unhealthy. So, the years that everyone's complaining about weren't that different in volume to 2019, which was the year before everything went wrong. And nobody was complaining that 2019 was a down year in the market. So I think we just kind of self-induced a glut of bikes, and now all those people sitting on large gluts are having to do deep discounts, which I think is going to create the next real threat to us in the industry, which is nobody's going to want to pay retail for the next 5 years. Ooh. Because we've conditioned everybody to buy stuff at 25 to 50% off. So and I think for the general public, they see it as there was always that margin there, and which is not the case. A lot of these bikes are being sold at a loss because people just need to move their networking capital, So,
Yeah.
so I think, biggest threat for us is that. Secondary, our future government leaders are putting, a lot of statements out there about tariffs and restrictions on incoming supply out of Asia. And Asia's where bikes are built for the most part. And so that's going to change our industry a lot too.
So I have a different perspective in terms of, we manufacture most of our stuff ourselves here in Asheville. I'm not 100% sure that I want to say what happened during COVID in the bike industry as necessary.
I'm interested. That was my upcoming question. Was like, what exactly happened in COVID? There's something changed. I thought there wasn't stuff available. There wasn't parts available. I didn't understand what really happened.
Well, when it first was announced, I think everybody pushed the panic button because nobody knew what to do. So everybody started canceling orders.
Okay.
And that was pretty uniform throughout the industry. Everybody kind of braced for impact, so to speak. That was, around the February timeframe. By April, it had become painfully clear that not only were we still going to be able to sell bikes, but we were selling them at a faster rate than we ever had. So it went from complete famine and constrictive, scarcity mindset to, oh my gosh, got to turn everything back on, got to get purchase orders in place and got to go crazy. And so for the next 18 months, it was a bidding war to who could get the most bikes in because you were selling them as soon as you got them in. So it went from this compressive decision to freeze everything. And within 90 days was just buy everything you can. So that's how it all started. That's where the irrationality began.
Well, Clint, on the manufacturing side, you're on the backside. You're the one getting those purchase orders. So how was your experience?
Well, I mean, it was the same thing with all of us. I was working very hard in March of 2020 to get into the medical world. We had a company that had made high-end medical packaging type machines. And so we had some background from past experiences. And I was pretty convinced that people wouldn't need or wouldn't be particularly interested in bicycles during a pandemic. And so I wanted to get into that world. Just, I had 100 employees. I wanted to make sure that they had jobs, if nothing else, and that our company would survive. That became, just like Jason was saying, very obvious that was the opposite. I think a big piece of that was the government stimulus money, and people need to socially distance. So the bicycle became probably the most explosive industry to be in for about a year and a half. Everybody scrambled. I had big questions to answer, like how much we going to expand. A lot of the bike industry just needed to put more purchase orders to their Asian factories. I had to hire people and add machines and buy a new building and all that stuff. So I was debating hard, how much to go into it, and at that exit, how much it would hurt, because of course it was going to end. I think everybody got exuberant. They ordered too much. Also, like Jason was saying, they started competing for the Asian factory space. They started competing with me, putting in purchase orders to get ahead of other people. And we tried to keep it pretty rational. So we exited it pretty effectively. But essentially what it led to was about a year and a half of people buying bikes as fast as they could when there weren't a lot of bikes available. And then there was a short period of time where the supply chain delivered those bikes, and then it fulfilled a demand that was satisfied pretty quickly. And then everybody had huge inventory gluts. And then, of course, everything started going on discount. Yeah, you basically, if you wanted to take a quick snapshot of the cycling world, your manufacturing costs, your labor, your materials, everything is probably at very least 25% higher than it was in 2019.
Wow.
And you sure as heck weren't raising prices. And as a matter of fact, if you want to sell anything, you better discount it about 25. So no industry can be profitable with those numbers.
Yeah.
Although, admittedly, you're seeing more consumer direct stuff that has saved some people from complete devastation, but that's also hurting, the bike shops, and the industry is going to be different for sure. But, as it pertains to your question on the supply chain side of things, everybody in business today has lived through probably the most stable climate humanity has ever experienced, especially in the business world. I mean, we had globalization, we had computer systems, we had transportation systems that lulled everybody in the false sense that supply was easy and there weren't shocks, there weren't big spikes in demand and big drops in demand. I mean, we all were experienced with recessions that, maybe reduced your business by 5 or 10%. And that was horrible.
Yeah.
But now, we doubled in size during the pandemic and then halved in size. So, those are big swings that are just not very easy for people to get their minds around who have experienced early stability. Now, I had one benefit, and that was because I was in the manufacturing world in the early 90s when globalization started. So it devastated our machine shop while all kinds of work went to Asia, and including the bicycle world, but all kinds of other industries as well. So, we saw the devastation of, how major changes can, really affect your life. And so I think we were probably a little more mentally prepared to deal with it.
I heard like 90% of the biking manufacturing is in Taiwan. Is that right?
Yeah, you can answer that better, Jason.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say manufacturing is in Taiwan, but I would say 90% of bike brands have a footprint in Taiwan to some level of degree, like whether they working with a sourcing agent or they have their own private offices there. And a lot of that is all centered around Taichung, which is just kind of like Bike City. And what's happened over the years, though, is that's kind of leached out into the other countries around it. And so now you've got manufacturing in Malaysia. Like it's branched out. The first branch was China. And so China became where Taiwanese company owners would have their factories. So people that originally started building bikes in Taiwan had gone on to China for cheaper labor and built factories. And that was pretty dominant for about 20 years. And so it made it really hard. Like Clint, I had ran a company that manufactured in the States too. We ended up shipping parts to Asia to be assembled because what I would say is about 90% of bikes are assembled in that region. And a lot of the assemblers are still in Taiwan, which is where the Taiwan reference comes from. So even though the frames are being made in a different country and the parts are made in different countries, they all end up in an assembler where they turn into a bike. And I think most of that business as a whole still funnels through Taiwan.
And there are a lot of the companies like in Vietnam, Malaysia, and everything else, aren't they owned by Taiwanese businessmen generally?
100%. Yeah, almost all of it. If you trace it back, it's a guy that had a business in the 80s in Taiwan making stuff, and then he's gone on to build factories in other regions. It's just chasing the cheapest manufacturing possible, which is really not being driven by Asia. It's being driven by Western partners. It's just like Western partners don't want to admit it. But like we were the ones teaching them how to make stuff. We were over there telling them what to make and how to make it. So yeah, it's Taiwan is a very, like Taichung, Taiwan is a very bike centric city. Like everybody's been there. All the companies have some kind of affiliation with it. It's bike, it's the bicycle city of the world at this point.
So in a few years, if there is a political unrest in Taiwan, what's going to happen to the bike industry?
It'll be a massive effect on the bike industry,
especially
if we end up with all of these tariffs and sanctions and stuff between the U.S. and China. If China decides they're taking Taiwan back, that could lend for some real problem.
Clint, is that good for you though?
Well, okay. If tariffs were to shut down,
I'm asking some hard questions now.
if tariffs were to shut down China, China doesn't invade Taiwan, I'm not going to pretend to understand China and Taiwanese relationships sufficiently, but I imagine it's good enough to say that they intend on getting Taiwan back, but there's a lot of business involvement where, economically, it just doesn't make sense for there to be a war. Of course, didn't make economic sense for us to have our civil war. Those things still happen. My guess is as tariffs happen, China is actually more likely to invade Taiwan. And of course, there's a possibility that Taiwan voluntarily reunifies. But let's just put it this way. No matter what the tension is, if there's dramatic tariffs, yes, some of my business will improve. But if it gets to the point to where there's a war, the whole industry is going to be shut down. So I might have a lot of components that don't have bike frames to be put on. Now, what I do hope, and I think the threats of tariffs are something that are obviously every business person that has a supply chain in Asia right now should be heavily considering bringing manufacturing back just simply because of those global political risks. And if that happens over a slow period of time, we can, improve manufacturing now and get more manufacturing here. Now, let me also state another thing. This is part of the technology advances. Right now, you would not want too much manufacturing to return to this country because you'd have labor problems. And a lot of people in this country aren't particularly excited about working in factories and stuff like that. What I suspect...
That seems to be the one part that nobody talks about. Like, it's
This is
really
weird.
idealistic to re-onshore jobs. But you got to have people that are willing to do those jobs. And both Clint and I have employed a lot of people domestically. And getting young people to do those hard, arduous, repetitive tasks routinely, it's not so much an option anymore. Like, and that's a major missing component in the re-onshoring jobs thing. Is who's going to do it?
Well, now I'll say, there's some generational changes. I do think the people in their 20s are maybe a little bit more likely to want to work with their hands, but my generation probably maximized it. I mean, when I told my friends that I was going to go into manufacturing, they were kind of like, "Oh, it's a kind of quaint, arcade position to take." There was not a lot of respect. I have a lot of respect now. A lot of people really admire that we manufacture in the States and manufacture in a fairly major way in the States. In my early career, that wasn't the case. But there's another big piece of this technology in the bicycle industry. We have a lot of automation. We have CNC machines that automate some of the metal cutting. We have robots that load the machines, but there are limits in terms of what these robots can do. I'm not a big expert with carbon fiber, although that's the direction I plan to take. The hand layup of carbon fiber is very intensive and subject to mistakes and stuff like that. So robotics, there's a lot of robotic capabilities, but robots aren't intelligent. And there are certain tasks that are kind of short-circuited because of the lack of intelligence. And so my expectation is artificial intelligence is going to make robots a lot more capable. And we will be able to have more manufacturing in this country because you'll have a few manufacturers that are able to, and people who are willing to work in manufacturing who are able to utilize robotics and actually get a lot more done. And that's going to be pretty critical because otherwise you're not going to see those supply chains return.
And then the robots with AI is where we need to lean into because of the workforce preferences, shortages, especially if we start not leveraging as much immigrants, then we're not going to have a workforce to do the manual stuff. So the robotics with AI. So it sounds like the biking industry to me is going to go through some serious changes in the future. Either way, there's just too much probability that there's going to be some significant changes in the biking industry. Yeah.
The reality of it is you went to Asia or you died. We figured out a niche, but even that was only in the very highest end of the components. And that also came from me having manufacturing experience that started when I was 5 years old. Again, it was just a complete necessity to go to Asia. You weren't going to survive otherwise.
Yeah, with the margins, because it was such cheap labor, essentially. Okay, good. All right. Well, fellas, thank you so much. This has been such an insightful, interesting conversation. And I did remember the quote of the podcast. So what is your quote, most interesting part of the discussion? We'll start with Clint. What is your quote of the podcast?
Not 100% sure. I had one that particularly stood out to me. I did appreciate, Jason's comments about the interconnectedness of the supply chain and how all that worked. I can't to a soundbite, but I think that's what I found.
Good. Jason, what about you?
Well,
that's good. My
My
favorite quote was Jason Snarky, and I like that. Thank you, Jason.
He is snarky, but he also has some of the best relationships in the industry. So
good. You guys all three have a good. Guy. Yeah, you three are a good little triple here. That's a good situation. You guys all working together. All right. Thanks so much. Appreciate your time, and just thanks again for connecting and just trying to provide some interesting conversation and really to allow others to realize that there's other people in this world. And this is what different industries are talking about, to unite people. So I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on the podcast.